Okay, let's do this. What's up, booktube? It's Leah Cooper, and it has been a hot minute since I made a booktube video. You know, it's not because I haven't been reading. I have actually been reading, not as many pages as I would have liked, though I feel like I had this like one really intense week in the middle of the month where I read an insane number of pages, but like a good amount. I think I've read 7 things this month. I'm not sure if they're all novels. One of them might have been a short story. I'll get into that in a second, but like I've been reading a good amount, and there were so many. I've been telling myself almost every single day for like the last 2 weeks, you need to make a booktube video, you need to make a booktube video, but I just didn't want to. And you know, I just didn't want to, so I didn't. You know, that is what it is. I find that usually there is some month every summer where I just kind of ghost my channel. And apparently this year, that month is August. It's not going to be September, though, because September I have so many plans. And then it's not going to be October because, holy crap, I've been working through, like, all of my arcs that I have to read this year are books that are coming out in October. And October is just going to be, like, nothing but book reviews, apparently. But let's talk about the things that I read in August, because I read some really great stuff, actually. First, I have to pull up this month on my handy dandy spreadsheet. So I am recording this on the 28th, so the month isn't over. Usually I do like to wait till the very end of the month, but I just finished a book literally 20 minutes ago, and I know I'm not going to get anything else finished by the end of the month, because my next book I'm going to be picking up is like 400 pages, and I'm not going to read that in 3 days. I know myself. And I'm also listening to an audiobook that is not going to get done. So I'm just going to record this now. I read 2,235 pages across 7 titles, and that means, well, like, so it says that my average pages per day was 72 pages a day. Probably it's slightly higher than that, though, if you take into account the fact that I am a third of the way into an audiobook, and I am definitely going to read a little bit more for the end of the month. So it's not like a super high month. Last month I read just shy of 3,000 pages, so it is significantly smaller than that, but it's still pretty average for this year. The first thing I read was a short story. I will leave a link to it down below. It is Harvest by Rebecca Rowanhorse. I think this was from Uncanny Magazine, like almost positive, like a recent issue of Uncanny Magazine. But yeah, it's definitely available to read online, so I'll leave it down below. And it is just a short story about a woman who is kind of seduced by this other woman who's definitely some sort of like mythical figure who keeps convincing her to murder white people and take their hearts. And it has something to do with Native American, some sort of Native American myth, and it's something about Native identity. It's been a month since I read the short story, so sorry for not being more coherent. It is kind of gruesome, but might make a good Halloween or Valentine's Day read. There you go. I think it was definitely interesting. I gave it 3.5 stars. It's like 11 pages. It's a short story. Okay. Then the next thing I read was an arc, and that is Phoenix Extravagant by Yoon-Ha Lee. So this is coming out in October, I believe, from Solaris or Rebellion, probably Rebellion, because it's fantasy. I will have a full review of this on my channel closer to the release date. I gave this like 3.75 stars. I've read quite a few of Yoon-Ha Lee's books, and I would say like in the like taking them all into account, it's not as good as Nine Fox Gambit, but it's better than Dragon Pearl for me. Like I enjoyed it a lot more than Dragon Pearl, but nowhere near as much as Nine Fox Gambit. It's more like on par with maybe Raven's Stratagem. I didn't care for Raven's Stratagem and Revenant Gun as much as Nine Fox Gambit. Like that book is still like I think the best thing I've ever read from Yoon-Ha Lee. So it's just kind of in the middle for me. This is a fantasy. I think it's supposed to be a standalone, but frankly the way it's set up at the end, I could see it really easily being expanded into more books. This is a steampunk fantasy novel about a gender non-binary protagonist who is an artist and is got bills to pay, and they are living in a country that has been annexed by an invading country, and they're called like Special District 14 or something like that. And they are obviously part of like the marginalized population group in this district. The invaders are like the upper class, and they're trying to find a job as an artist, and they kind of get blackmailed into working for a military branch of the ruling government's whatever, where they are making automata, which are kind of golems with painted masks that have their code on them. And they uncover a bunch of stuff, and they find out things about like their sister and like in a resistance group, and they fall in love, and it is a good story. I am talking about this way too much. Like, I'm going to be doing a review for this. 3.75 stars. It's kind of a middling book from Yoon Ha Lee for me, but I think if the premise sounds interesting, you should check it out. There we go. Like, I gotta catch myself, otherwise I will just like talk for way too long in these wrap-ups that are already too long. Okay, so the next thing I read was a DNF, and I think this was my first DNF of the year, and that was Beyond the Shadowed Earth by Joanna Ruth Mayer. So I got this from my library. I put a request on it months and months ago, back when I worked at a bookstore and I'd been put in the children's department. I've said this a billion times, and I just wanted to keep my ear to the ground on YA new releases. This is a YA fantasy new release. I got 2 of these, and I DNF'd both of them for very different reasons. This one I just DNF'd because how far did I get into? I got 60 pages into this book, and I was just bored, and I didn't like the protagonist. Like, I aggressively disliked this protagonist. She was just kind of awful, and also I really didn't care for her, like, militant, aggressive desire to invade other countries so that she could bring the gods to them. It was just uncomfortably, religious. It was uncomfortable religious imperialism being spouted by the protagonist, and who knows, she may go on a journey and like decide that oppressing people with your religion isn't like the way to do things, but I didn't want to read 300 more pages of that to get there. That's just my thoughts. So yeah, I DNF'd that, and I'm probably not going to pick up anything else by that author. Then, after that, was Tome Topple. I did have big plans for Tome Topple. I expected to read 2 books for that this year. I only got 1 read. The one I got read was Daughter of the Forest by Juliette Marillier. So this came off my 20 books to read in 2020 TBR. I picked this out of the TBR jar last month, but I decided to hold on to it and read it for Tome Topple this month, and it was fantastic. I read it in 5 pages. I think I had been planning to read it in 7, but I literally finished it 2 days ahead of schedule. I read almost 300 pages of this in 2 days. Like, the end, I could not put it down. I could not stop reading it. I gave this 5 stars. One of the best things I've read this year. There is a warning for a very graphic rape scene, and that is the one thing in this book I don't like, because I think it was overly graphic and unnecessarily overly graphic. Like, it went on for like 3.5 pages, and there's a torture scene to a different character in this book that happens off screen, and whatever happened to that character, how he was tortured, how he was like permanently scarred and stuff, is hinted at but never explicitly described. And I got the impression from the hints that he might have been castrated as part of his torture, but that's never explicitly stated. Tell me if you've read this and you didn't or did interpret it the same way. And the fact that was completely, like, the author took such pains to never explicitly say what had happened to him, but we got 3.5 pages of a graphic rape scene, bugs the shit out of me. But other than that, I thought the rest of this book was so well done. It was so interesting. It's such a good fairy tale retelling. If you like long, detailed fairy tale retellings, I think this is absolutely amazing. The 6 swans, not the 7 swans, because they're 6 brothers, duh. Okay, so it is based off that fairy tale, and it is a really well done. It's kind of pre-unified Britannia, and it deals with like a druidic Ireland, and it's an interesting piece of fiction. It came out in 2000, I think, and it definitely, I think, holds a very interesting place in like women written fantasy, epic high fantasy fiction. Both you can see where it was influenced by other authors. I have not read The Mists of Avalon, but I suspect that this was heavily influenced by that, and I'm not saying go read that. Don't go read that, because no one needs to waste time on Marion Zimmer Bradley. But I think you can, there's probably a lot of like influences of that segment of the fantasy fiction world that shaped this book, and then you can also see where this book has shaped books that came after it. Namely, I was reading this, and like the first third of it strongly reminds me of The Bear and the Nightingale. So I think if you like The Bear and the Nightingale and you can handle darker themes and a slower plot, then you should also consider picking this up, because it is genuinely just like so good, and it's got an amazing romance in it that was just like perfect. Like the ending of this book, I sobbed through the entire last 100 pages. The ending of this book was perfection. Loved it so much. There we go. I'll stop talking about it now. Okay, so that was my one book I read for Tome Topple. The other book I was supposed to read for Tome Topple was The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest. But okay, the thing about this is like this was such an impactful book to me emotionally as a reader that I couldn't pick up The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest next. That's like a tonal shift I could not do. I wanted to read more of this. So I went, and since The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest is a book off my 20 to read in 2020 TBR, I decided to go ahead and replace it with a different book off that TBR, so I would still be reading something off that TBR this month, but something a little bit more tonally similar to Daughter of the Forest, and that was Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. So I pre-ordered this book back in 2018, and I'm only just now getting around to reading it, because terrible. This is why I do not pre-order books. But this was like a birthday splurge. So finally read this. This was interesting. This is 460 pages, so it wasn't quite long enough to count as a Tome Topple book, but it felt like a Tome Topple book because it's 460 pages. It's almost a tome. But you know, it doesn't technically count. But so I read this, and I did give it 4 stars. Oh no, I actually gave it 4.5 stars. I do think it was good. I don't love it as much as Uprooted, but it was good. It was really surprising. It was really kind of odd. So I expected something a lot like Uprooted, but with like a Rumpelstiltskin fairy tale retelling, but it wasn't that at all. It's multi-POV. There's a bunch of different plot lines happening in this, all interconnected with one another. It is a Rumpelstiltskin retelling, but it's the choices it makes are always really surprising and like so just not what I would expect from a Rumpelstiltskin retelling. I mean, let's be real. What Rumpelstiltskin retellings have I really read? None. I mean, I've seen the first season of Once Upon a Time. You could call that a Rumpelstiltskin retelling. And that's really it. So, but this was just really, really surprising. It follows a girl who, she's a Jew living in like a fantasy version of the Ukraine, and her father is the local moneylender of a very tiny, poor village, and he is too kind-hearted to call in debts, and the villagers are all real shitty to them. Like, everyone owes them. No one will pay back their debts or their interest or anything, and everyone treats them with contempt because, you know, they're Jews and they're moneylenders in historic Ukraine. She decides to basically take over his work one winter when her mother is sick and dying, and she makes herself cold-hearted and refuses to take no shit from any of the villagers, and she starts calling in debts, and she builds up this small business, and that attracts the attention of kind of a ice winter fairy folk who are obsessed with gold. And she ends up she ends up calling in the debt of a man who has no money, and she says, fine, your daughter will work for me and work off your debt. And at first, that's like, when Miriam does it, it seems kind of like a shitty thing to do, like making this girl work for her. But then we get the girl's perspective. Her name's Wanda. And to Wanda, this opportunity to work outside of her family house, her father's a drunk and abusive, is such an amazing opportunity for freedom from that environment. And then also, Miriam starts hiring her to do other tasks and offers to start paying her. And Wanda can hide this from her father. And this gives her a chance at making an income that she can save for herself to escape. That is like an opportunity that is like completely denied women in this point in time. And getting those two perspectives was amazing. And then we also get a perspective of a duke's daughter who is married off to the Tsar, who is possessed by a demon, and it turns out that the fight between these ice creatures is actually with the demon inside the Tsar, and like all the stuff that's happening, it's all interconnected. It is so fascinating and so interesting. If you like multi-POV fairy tales, I think this is great. It is definitely different than Uprooted, but it's really interesting. And I think I especially just really, I loved Wanda's storyline. I loved Miriam's storyline. I loved the interplay in like the female relationships. I thought that was really great. So yeah, 4.5 stars. Talking about that book kind of reminded me of how much, that was like genuinely really enjoyable to read. So after that, Tome Topple was basically over. I had substituted this book for The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest. Decided not to read that. I'll read it sometime later in the year. Actually, I figure this title is still in my TBR jar, so when I pull out this title from my TBR jar, I'll just sub in The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest because I can't find my slip of paper with that title name on it. There was one other book I was supposed to read off my 20 and 20 TBR shelf, and that was The Three Body Problem by Cixin Liu. And I did read a couple pages of this, and it never quite hooked me, and I was also reading something else at the same time, and I ended up just focusing on that something else, and just, I only got maybe 6 or 7 pages into The Three Body Problem. I am going to come back to it. I think I'm just not in the mood for it right now. I will try to read it again later in the year. I've already folded that slip with the paper with that title on it and put it back in my TBR jar. So, yeah, I read 2 things this month off that TBR jar instead of 3, so I'm still kind of behind, but 2 out of 3 is not bad, right? So the thing I was reading at the same time as The Three Body Problem was The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher. This is the first T. Kingfisher novel I have read. I have read a couple of her short stories that have appeared in short story anthologies, but I've never read one of her novels. I got an arc of this off NetGalley. I think a bunch of us probably did, to be honest, because this was sent out in an email, right? And this is like a supernatural horror novel, and I don't read much horror at all. But I've been being part of the SFF community. I think horror does cross over with SFF in a lot of ways, and I think there's a lot of people who read all 3 of those genres, and also just in general, those are 3 genres that all kind of just fit under speculative fiction, right? And so I've been kind of thinking, maybe I should try to read more horror, right? Because all these people around me are reading it, enjoying it. And so that's why and also I wanted to read a T. Kingfisher book. So that's why I grabbed this. And I enjoyed it, though also there were definitely times while I was reading it where I was like, this is why I don't read horror. Because I get scared really easily, and then I'm just scared, and I don't want to leave my room, and it's the middle of the night, and that being said, I did like this. I gave it 3.5 stars. It kind of lost a star just because the reveal, I think, was foreshadowed too aggressively and too obviously for me to enjoy it, because it was just it was so easy to figure out what the thing was, that the fact that it took so long for the character, they didn't even figure it out. They were just presented with the facts, was kind of come on, catch up, please can't you even be a little suspicious? Because it was too on the nose, right? But otherwise, I thought it was really interesting. It has a really obvious mishmash of like Gravity Falls, Stranger Things, and kind of Annihilation. Not the book, the movie. I haven't read the book, so I can't speak for the book, but really strongly influenced by Annihilation, the film, at least. If you like those three things, I think you could like this. It is written in a first-person perspective, and so you do need to get along with the character's voice. My friend Jackie was also reading this book, and she DNF'd it, mostly because she really, I think, didn't get along with the character's voice, which I totally get. The character does kind of verge on possibly being a little too irritating. Even for me, there were a couple times I was like, okay. Like, it felt a little like fan fiction-y self-insert in places. But I did like the world. It's about a girl. It's about a woman. She's gone through a divorce. She's moved back in with her uncle, who runs it's basically the Mystery Spot, but it's not. It has some other name to it, but it's a weird museum. And she's taking care of it for him while he has to go and have a surgery on his knee, and he's recuperating somewhere else. And she finds a hole knocked into the wall upstairs, and when she and a friend from next door go through the hole, they go into this world, which is like a connecting place between all these different worlds. Like, holes are opening up, and like weird stuff is there and hunting them, and it is definitely creepy and interesting, and it has some really cool stuff in it, and I enjoyed it. Am I going to continue this, like, jaunt into horror? I don't know. I think I need my horror, and again, this was, like, supernaturally horror, so I did enjoy it, well, but it also had kind of a definitely strong science fiction element, and I think having those other really, really strong genre elements is the thing that makes the horror, for me, difficult, but still interesting. So I'm not going to say no. I am going to keep trying to dip my toes into this, like, maybe this crossover place of the genres, and we'll see. But yeah, so I will have a video with like more of my thoughts about the Holo Places out in October when the book comes out. There we go, because it was an arc. After that, I did start reading Arabella and the Battle of Venus, but I didn't finish it this month. That's my audiobook I'm listening to. The last thing I read and finished this month was A Rogue by Any Other Name by Sarah MacLean. This was a reread. It's a historical romance novel. After finishing The Holo Places, I just didn't know what to read next. Because it's like, yeah, there's things I should read. I should have read The Three-Body Problem. Maybe should have read The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest. But I just didn't feel like picking up either of those books. So I gave my boyfriend my want to read shelf on Goodreads. And he was just kind of glancing through the titles. And he was like, I want to find something that you're going to have fun telling me about. And he picked out a book that's down there, and I don't want to grab it. It's like No Good Deed Goes Unpunished or something like that. And I was like, I can't read that right now because I got to reread the first book of that series and I got to read the second book. And he's like, well, then reread the first one and tell me about it. So that's what I did. I reread A Rogue by Any Other Name. This was the second romance novel I ever read back in like 2014 when I was just kind of dipping my toes into the romance genre because I was trying to write romance novels. And at the time I gave it like a 3.5. I think I gave it just a 3-star. And this time around I'd give it like a 2.5 stars. I did have some fun telling him about the book. Last night when I was reading it, I did read out some just choice paragraphs that were cringy. I don't think it's a bad historical romance novel. I think if you like the genre, you'll definitely find this entertaining. Ultimately, I found the two characters boring dishwater. And reading this kind of helped, reading this and talking to him about it kind of helped me pinpoint why I'm struggling to read romance novels, because I used to read a lot, not a lot, but a fair few romance novels, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, especially, well, historical romance novels. Like I used to read a ton of Courtney Milan, and I didn't like the last like 3 Courtney Milans I read. I didn't like the last Sarah MacLean I read, not this one, but another one I read of hers last year. I didn't even really like the last one or two KJ Charles books I read from her new releases. And I've been really struggling with why am I suddenly not liking those books? And I don't know what it is, but it is 100% I think a taste thing. There's a certain structure to like pure romance genre novels where obviously the romance is the number one plot and there is much less like happening around the characters. The characters are participating in less activities. They're doing less than, say, a book like this, where the romance is third, or a book like this, where the romance is secondary plot. There's just because this has a romance. Like the last 75 pages or 100 pages are just like the romance parts. But there's so much more going on that the characters don't just spend 100 pages thinking to themselves about their feelings and having like the same recursive interior monologue over and over again. Other stuff is happening. They have to do other things. They have to participate or engage with or deal with other things. And they're not just sitting around thinking or describing the person they're in love with. And I found that with A Rogue by Any Other Name, I could finally pinpoint that it's this chunk, huge, massive chunk of the book where instead of having a B plot, because there is none, the character just thinks about their feelings or thinks about the person they're in love with. And it's just boring. Like I just want more things to happen. Because characters just thinking about their feelings, to me, doesn't create tension or urgency. It's really hard to describe, but I think I don't have the interest in reading that kind of like navel gazing anymore. And that's why I've just like, the last couple of romance novels I've read over the last 2-ish years have just been complete misses for me. And it's like legit not because I don't like a good romance. It's because I just don't like the structure of genre romance novels. Because for instance, just knocking shit down. Like this series, this has a romance, and the first book, the romance is again very much a secondary plot. The romance in general is a really important theme throughout this entire first book in the series. But there's just like other things happening and going on, other people with issues, the characters having issues and plot, and I don't know, it's just like so much more interesting. So I like really prefer reading something like this. So my camera battery died and I just spent the last hour and a half charging it, and I honestly don't remember what I was saying. Probably something about like romance in one book, why I like it, why I didn't like romance in another book. I suspect I probably made my point. So we're just gonna film the outro now, right? Yeah, because I talked about all the books I've read. It was a pretty good reading month, like a DNF, but also a 5-star and a 4.5-star read. So I'll take it as like a positive reading month. Anyways, let me know down below if you've read any of the things I've read, or if you're thinking about picking them up. What was your favorite book that you read this past month? I think for my challenges, I did pretty good. I wanted to get 3 books read from my 2020 TBR, and I did 2 out of the 3, so that's pretty good. I also read, I think, about 4 things that I owned, 2 of them being like physical books I owned, 1 of them being an ebook, and then 2 of the other things I read were both ARCs, so I did pretty good on that challenge. I wanted to get my library books down to like 30 or 40% of my reading this year, just because I wanted to focus more on reading like owned books. And my library usage really spiked during the BookTube SFF Awards for obvious reasons. That percentage has been going down since I finished reading for that award. I've got my library percent down to 48%, and then online / NetGalley is about 13%, and then the remaining 38.5% is Kindle books I own or physical books I own. So we are getting there. I'm definitely going to have a little bit higher net gallery percent this year just because I am getting ARCs and also trying to keep up with them. So, yeah. Anyways, thanks for watching. Hello to all the new people. Hope you stick around. If you are new here, yes, I mostly talk about SFF with the occasional random thing thrown in, but let's be real, it's like mostly SFF. I think like 80% of what I have read this year is SFF, mostly adult, varying mix of old stuff and newer things because I used to work for a used bookstore, and also I like reading older books too. I'm not necessarily always wanting to read the newest things. Ironic considering like I read 2 ARCs this month for books that haven't even come out yet, but I think it's a pretty good mix of all sorts of random things. Anyways, thanks for watching. I will be back in a couple of days with my Space Opera September TBR, so look forward to that because I am looking forward to it. See you guys.